The Thule Society of Germany is a secret occult group of black magic, sorcery, mediums, and advanced technology, and it goes back to 1910 officially. But in 1919, the society created the German Workers' Party to enter onto the political scene. Starting later that year, Dietrich Eckart, a member of the inner circle of the Thule Society, had initiated Hitler, and he began to train him in its methods for harnessing a power known as the power of the Vril.
People like Dietrich Eckart who are sitting there in seances having ectoplasmic bursts of evil spirits before their eyes. This is all documented. This is not out there.
Eckart was training Hitler in this Vril magic in efforts to create a race of Aryan supermen, or super soldiers, if you will. And the idea of the supreme Aryan race goes right back to the inner earth and the religious beliefs surrounding such, even back to the Hindu beliefs of the Aryavarta, or the land of the Aryans. But Hitler had been mystic-minded from his youth when he had studied the occult and theosophy while living in Vienna. Needless to say, he was already prepared for this mystic training. So what exactly was this Vril that Hitler was being trained to harness by Eckart? Well, in 1871, Edward Bulwer-Lytton wrote a fictional tale called Vril, the Power of the Coming Race.
What's important to note is that Bulwer-Lytton was a Rosicrucian initiate.
He was a Rosicrucian, alleged to be a High Mason, and also a member of the Golden Dawn. He was English. He wasn't some crackpot. He was a well-known author at the time. He wrote The Last Days of Pompeii. You probably saw the movie if you didn't read the book. He was a well-known author and highly respected.
The Coming Race basically tells the story of a man who ends up falling into subterranean tunnels through a mine shaft. And he comes into contact with this very advanced, mysterious race who call themselves the Vril. These beings claim to be descendants of an antediluvian race. Basically, they claim to be the descendants of the gods in the antediluvian world. In fact, the Vril claim that they were able to escape the flood by going under the earth, and have since lived under the earth since the days of the flood. The book describes the Vril having telepathic abilities. They were very intelligent, but what is most fascinating is that they were in possession of advanced technology, such as flying saucer technology. They were able to harness a power that Bulwer-Lytton referred to as the Vril. And this power was supposed to be so strong that a single child could wield the Vril in such a way that he could destroy armies, legions of men. Many of the most prominent, high-ranking occultists of the late 19th century, such as Helena Blavatsky and Rudolf Steiner, actually believed that the story that was told in The Coming Race contained occult truth. In other words, there was truth to this idea that this race called the Vril had been existing under the earth since the days of the Great Flood in the antediluvian world. In fact, the belief of the Vril and of the power of Vril was actually so prominent among German occultists that it gave birth to a secret society, one of the most notorious secret society involving the Nazi regime, called the Vril Society.
I call Helena Blavatsky pretty much the anti-Moses. What she did was she took all of Eastern mysticism, occult, cutting-edge speculative sciences in her day, which is in the 1870s, and she put everything and anything that we would call New Age or occult together into one cohesive thought, one cohesive story of the Atlanteans before a great deluge, that there were 7 races. They became corrupt, so they made a superior master race to be over all the rest of them. Most of them went into a subterranean domain and remained there after a deluge. Others stayed on the surface and became a diluted strain, which was still a part of them as a genetic connection.
The Vril themselves, according to Bulwer Lytton, were waiting for a time when they would ascend to the surface of the earth and rule over the kingdoms of men.
And they were destined someday to reunite, and then take over the entire world, which rightfully was theirs according to Blavatsky. So this is almost like a reversal kind of role of the book of Deuteronomy. But she made this cohesive. That was their religion. That was what motivated them. They were destined. They had to find an opening to a hollow earth.
Now, the Vril Society believed that the German people, were descended from the same Aryan God-man race. In other words, some demigod race from the antediluvian world. They were descended from the same root race as the Vrilya under the earth. And so the Vril Society was very interested in purifying their genetics to be able to recover some of those latent abilities that the Vrilya have to this day, the Vrilya, the race that's living under the earth. And part of those latent abilities involve telepathic communication, but most importantly, the ability to access and manipulate the power of Vril. The Vril Society spent a lot of time and energy studying and even looking for the ancient antediluvian great cities such as Atlantis, such as Shambhala, such as Thule. They spent a lot of time and money actually under the regime of Adolf Hitler exploring the globe, especially in Tibet, the Antarctic, trying to rediscover the remains of these ancient cities and recover some of the lost knowledge. And we're talking about ancient cities and lost knowledge that belongs to the world before the flood of Noah, the antediluvian world. So what are we talking about? We're talking about the knowledge that came down at the advent of the Watchers, the illicit knowledge that was given to mankind, that corrupted mankind and led to the Great Flood. This is the knowledge that the Vril Society was trying to recover. And again, their greatest objective was to access and harness the power of the Vril. But they also believed that the Aryan race could be restored, that the genetics of the Aryan race could be restored, and that they could once again become the Übermenschen, the overmen, the superhumans that would dominate all other races on earth, because they traced their lineage back to the Aryan God-men. We might say back to the Nephilim, of which they believed the Vril were also part of that genetic line. They were a divergent genetic line from the Vril. So the Vril who lived under the ground had still maintained, we're still able to access their latent powers. We're still able to manipulate Vril power. We're still able to use their telepathic abilities. And basically, the Vril Society and the Nazis, the Nazi regime, also wanted to access these latent powers and obviously use them for military application.
Among this compartmentalized group were many psychic mediums who would hold these powerful seances that have been written about throughout history, and they would channel various entities in search for power, technology, and what we would call today transhumanism. So when we wonder how the Nazis became so powerful and were able to harness such advanced technology and science, we find that much of these were the products of channeling sessions within the Thule and Vril societies.
What made the Vril Society unique is that among the many multifarious occult societies that existed at the time, it was one of the only ones that allowed women to have membership. Now, there were a specific group of women inside of the Vril Society. They were some of the primary participants and even leaders of the Vril Society. They're referred to as the Vril Maidens. These were very famous and powerful psychic mediums, German psychic mediums, and they were all females. The chief psychic among them was a woman by the name of Maria Orsic. Maria Orsic was a powerful medium who was operating inside of the Thule Society, and she ended up coming over to the newly formed Vril Society and leading the Vril Maidens, which also included a woman by the name of Sigrun, who is somewhat of a mysterious figure who was another leader within the Vril Maidens.
The women mediums of the Vril Society were known as being extremely beautiful and having long hair. This was their MO, or their trademark, if you will.
Well, the women in this cult grew their hair right down to their ankles, right down to the floor, because their hair was a cosmic antenna to reach the other world.
The Vril Maidens were distinctive in that they all wore their hair very long. And what these mediums believed about their hair, which actually ends up being a biblical concept, is that their hair caused them to be able to communicate better with entities, with these, if you want to call them demonic or extra-dimensional or alien entities. They felt that their hair, their long hair, worked somewhat like an antenna, which is interesting if you put it in the context of Scripture. And we find that in the New Testament, Paul is telling the women that when they pray, they should cover their heads for the sake of the angels. So there does seem to be a relationship between women's long hair and some kind of a seducing effect it has on angelic entities or perhaps interdimensional entities. That seems to be what Paul is indicating, for the sake of the angels. In other words, so that they don't stumble, is the way that I read into that verse. So these Vril Maidens were very high-level occultists. They were involved in all kinds of Crowleyan-style sex magic, and so were all of the members of the Vril Society. Remember, these are high-ranking Nazis that are members of the Vril Society, the highest-ranking Nazis, such as Adolf Hitler himself, and then all of his henchmen, all of his officials, his main officials. Most of them were part of this Vril Society, involved in these occult activities, which very likely also involved human sacrifice, the drinking of blood, and of course lots and lots of sex magic.
One of the most notable mediums of the society was Maria Orsic, who was on a constant mission to connect with entities from other galaxies, or as we would say, other dimensions. Towards the end of World War II, Maria Orsic claimed to have psychically received blueprints for a special alien spacecraft that would bring an escape to a select few into a galaxy known as the Aldebaran.
During a seance, Maria Orsic and another gal claimed to have come in contact with their ancient Nordic gods from the Aldebaran system in outer space. And from them, they actually literally got a map written in ancient Sumerian. It was actually like a blueprint with details on how to develop a time machine. This is the basis and the foundation, but later on we had the actual records of a Deglaka. But this was as early as in the 20s, so it took that length of time to even have the materials to begin to work on such a project.
They conducted a seance type ceremony, and they were trying to summon a particular person who had recently died. And what happened was they ended up making contact with these entities who claimed to be from the Aldebaran star system. And these entities began to channel through Maria Orsic, whose eyes were rolling back into her head. And these women, when they were involved in their occult ceremonies and seances and so forth, would allegedly actually secrete what they called ectoplasm. So they would be in these heightened occult states where their bodies and minds would be taken over and their voices would be taken over by entities, sometimes non-human entities. And in this particular occasion, that is what happened. So during this channeling ritual with Maria Orsic and another woman and these soon-to-be Nazi Party members, she began to channel these entities that claimed that they were from the Aldebaran star system. But they had come to Earth at some point in the distant past, and they settled in Sumer, in the plains of Shinar, until a great flood destroyed their civilization, after which time some of them were able to escape. These were the entities that were supposedly speaking through Maria Orsic. And she began to automatic write for them in Sumerian cuneiform and also in the Templars' secret coded language, so the legend goes. And when that cuneiform text and the coded language of the Templars was decoded, what they got were schematics, blueprints for the construction of flying machines, what we would call flying saucers.
Ironically, she was never found in the aftermath of the war. No dead body or even a trace of her existence.
The Vril Society is so secret to this day, we don't know that it ever actually existed. But it's kind of like the wind. You can't see it, you don't know that it's there, but you see the after effects of the resultant impact. The Vril Society, the only reason we know that there must be something to it, we see the results of engineers that worked as part of a member of this society that had secret knowledge, I believe, was given from fallen angels to actually accomplish technology that was so far above anything else that existed on this earth.
You cannot separate the Nazi Party, the Nazi regime, from the occult. And you cannot separate the occult part of the Nazi regime from contact with what some might refer to as extra-dimensionals or extraterrestrials, or perhaps the Vril Ya from under the earth, from the inner earth.
But the basis of the Nazi force, if you will, goes back to the Vril, or the power of the Vril, which according to occultists lies with the master entities inside the hollow earth. The Nazis knew this, the Hindus knew this, the Buddhists knew this, as well as countless others who have sought power and enlightenment in the world system, both politically and spiritually.